Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Answers on Eschatology. My name is Dan Derry, and I'm the president of the Institute of Fulfilled Eschatology. Hey, we're in the middle of a study on Matthew 24, and this evening I want to share some concluding thoughts from Matthew 24, 29, and 30, and concerning the coming of the Son of Man as the coming of the Lord at the day of the Lord. And in the previous couple videos, we have paralleled 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 2 Peter chapter 3, with Matthew 24, and we've shown that all of those texts speak of the coming of the Lord at the day of the Lord, but they all use different metaphorical and symbolic language to express the day of the Lord. For example, Matthew 24, at the day of the Lord, when the Son of Man comes on clouds, in power and great glory, the sun is darkened, the moon doesn't shed its light, the stars fall from heavens, and the powers of the heavens are shaken. In 2nd Thessalonians and 1st Thessalonians, Son of Man, the Lord also comes on the clouds with a shout, with a trumpet, with the angels, in flaming fire, taking vengeance on the ungodly. And in 2 Peter chapter 3, that day of the Lord is expressed as the destruction of heaven and earth, the melting of all of the elements, and the burning up of the works therein, etc. So the day of the Lord in all of these texts is expressed differently, yet I want to prove to you that all of that language is metaphorical. See, a lot of people can look at Matthew 24 and look at this language compared to Isaiah 13 or Ezekiel 30 or Joel chapter 2, all these texts, and say, yeah, this is metaphorical. I can see the coming of the Lord here in AD70, but they stumble over texts such as 1st and 2nd Thessalonians or 2 Peter 3. But what I'm showing you is that under the umbrella of the day of the Lord, all this language must be understood as the Old Testament prophets used it concerning the day of the Lord. And I want to go to one Old Testament prophecy, one prophet in this video, who basically uses all of these elements, all of this language in his one prophecy concerning the day of the Lord, which, by the way, was near, and it was to come quickly in his day, and that's the prophet Zephaniah. So, just as a recap, we looked at the day of the Lord as expressed as the coming of the Lord on clouds, with a trumpet, in flaming fire, the sun, moon being darkened, the heavens being shaken, the earth being destroyed, sinners judged, and the Lord comes with a shout, etc. So all of these elements, all of this language expresses the day of the Lord. Now listen to this prophecy in Zephaniah, and this concerns the imminent judgment of Jerusalem and Judah by Babylon between 605 and 586 BC. Okay? Watch this. Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 4, 7, and then 14 to 18, and then we'll move on, okay? But watch this. Zephaniah 1 and 4. So I will stretch out my hand against Judah and against all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and I will cut off the remnant of Baal from this place, and the names of the idolatrous priests along with the priests, and those who bow down on the housetops to the host of heaven, and those who bow down and swear to the Lord and yet swear by Malcham, and those who have turned back from following the Lord, and those who have not sought the Lord or inquired of him. See, this is a judgment for their violation of Torah. In other words, verse 7, be silent before the Lord God, for the day of the Lord is near. For the Lord has prepared a sacrifice. He has consecrated his guests. Let's just jump down to verse 14 for the sake of time, and we'll go down to 18. Near is the great day of the Lord, near and coming very quickly. Now that's so significant when we get to the day of the Lord of the New Testament. Zephaniah said this judgment that happened within about 15 or 20 years was near and would come quickly. Just think of Revelation chapter 1 and chapter 22. Okay, let's move on. Near is the great day of the Lord, near and coming very quickly. Listen, the day of the Lord. In it the warrior cries out bitterly. Now listen to this language. And remember, Matthew 24, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 2 Peter 3, a day of wrath is that day. There's wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of destruction and desolation, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. There's clouds, There's destruction. A day of a trumpet. The Lord will come with a trumpet. Day of a trumpet. A battle cry. In other words, a shout against the fortified cities and the high towers. I will bring distress on men so that they will walk like the blind because they have sinned against the Lord, and their blood will be poured out like the dust and their flesh like dung. Neither their silver nor their gold will be able to deliver them on the day of the Lord's wrath. This is his coming in wrath. Watch this. And all the earth will be devoured in the fire of his jealousy. Kind of sound like 2 Peter 3, doesn't it? For he will make a complete end. That's the destruction of the earth by fire. Indeed, a terrifying one of all the inhabitants of the earth. Now that sounds like the judgment of the world, the end of the world. But Zephaniah said that was, his prophecy was regarding Judah and Jerusalem, which was fulfilled in history in 586 BC. None of this language was fulfilled literally. It was all metaphoric language to denote judgment on Judah and Jerusalem. Go with me to chapter 3 of Zephaniah, and I want to show you a couple more elements, some further language, and we'll connect this with Matthew 24 specifically. Watch this. Zephaniah 3, verses 8 to 11, and then 15 to 20. Zephaniah 3 and verse 8. Therefore wait for me. And by the way, this is just a continuation. It's all one prophecy. Therefore wait for me, declares the Lord, for the day when I rise up as a witness. Indeed, my decision is to gather nations, to assemble kingdoms, to pour out my wrath, to pour out on them my indignation, all my burning anger, for all the earth will be devoured by the fire of my zeal. Wow. For then I will give to the people purified lips, that all of them may call on the name of the Lord to serve him shoulder to shoulder. Now something happens here. So this is judgment upon Judah and Jerusalem. This is the destruction and the burning up of the world, of the earth, okay, in metaphoric language. But at that time, he starts to purify the lips. In other words, through this judgment, through this destruction, through the day of the Lord, salvation, deliverance comes to Judah, comes to Jerusalem. Watch this. Verse 9, for then I will give to the people's purified lips, that all of them may call on the name of the Lord to serve him shoulder to shoulder. For from beyond the river of Ethiopia, my worshipers, my dispersed ones, will bring my offerings. In that day you will feel no shame because of all your deeds by which you have rebelled against me. For then I will remove from your midst your proud, your exalting ones, and you will never again be haughty on my holy mountain. So once again, the Lord is removing the wicked through this judgment at the day of the Lord, but he is bringing salvation and deliverance to his dispersed ones. And let's just jump down to verse 15 to 20 for the sake of time. The Lord has taken away his judgments against you. He has cleared away your enemies. The King of Israel, the Lord, is in your midst. Wait a second. How did he get in their midst? See, this is the coming of the Lord through judgment for salvation. The Lord is in your midst. You will fear disaster no more. In that day it will be said to Jerusalem, do not be afraid, O Zion. Do not let your hands fall limp. The Lord your God is in your midst. A victorious warrior. The Lord, he will exalt over you with joy. He will be quiet in his love. He will rejoice over you with shouts of joy. And verse 19 and 20, behold, I am going to deal at that time with your oppressors. I will save the lame. I will gather the outcasts. I will turn their shame into praise and renown in all the earth. At that time, I will bring you in. Even at that time, I will gather you together. Indeed, I will give you the renowned praise among all the peoples of the earth when I restore your fortunes before you rise, says the Lord. Did you catch this? At the time of the day of the Lord would be in their midst to save them and to gather them. That's exactly what we have in Matthew 24, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, and 2nd Peter chapter 3. Listen, I know I'm running a little bit late, but just let me finish this. Zephaniah talks about the destruction of earth, the coming of the Lord in flaming fire, a day of darkness and gloom, a trumpet, a battle cry, etc., etc. And in the midst of that judgment on Jerusalem at the day of the Lord, suddenly the Lord appears in their midst to save them, to gather them. That is his coming to gather together his elect. That's Matthew 24. In Matthew 24, we have the judgment of Old Covenant Jerusalem. The stars fall from heaven, the moon doesn't shed its light. But when the Lord comes on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, what happens? He sends forth his angels with a trumpet, and he gathers together his elect. That's the salvation of this remnant in Zephaniah chapters 1 to 3. Listen, the same thing happens in 2 Thessalonians chapters 1 and 2. When the Lord is revealed from heaven, he takes vengeance on those who were persecuting the Thessalonians. He gives relief to the Thessalonians. And that is the time of the resurrection, 1 Thessalonians 4 and 13 to 17. The same thing is true in 2 Peter chapter 3. At the day of the Lord comes, he burns up heaven and earth, every element is melted. But what happens? Peter encourages his dispersed Jews to hang on, to remain faithful, and to look for the new heavens and the new earth wherein dwells righteousness. Through that judgment at the day of the Lord, they would receive the new heavens and the new earth and their righteousness. This is Zephaniah chapter 3. This is what Peter was talking about. This is what Paul was talking about. This is what Jesus was talking about and prophesying as well. The judgment of Old Covenant Israel at the day of the Lord. But through that judgment, the remnant would be saved. The Lord would come with salvation. He would come and be in their midst. And he would deliver his people. And just like it says in Matthew 24, verse 31, when the Son of Man comes on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, he will send forth his angels. In verse 31, which we're going to in next video, he will gather together his elect. That gathering together of the elect is nothing else, nothing more, nothing less than the gathering of the righteous remnant of Israel, both living and dead. And we'll get to that next time on Answers on Eschatology. Thanks for your patience, guys. I appreciate letting me get that out. And I'm going to have a short week again. This is probably my last video for the week. I got to go out of town for business. We'll see you soon. Hopefully I'll do a video Sunday. God bless you. Appreciate your time. Bye for now.